Now, how does radiation in fact cause cancer? Because many people don't know. And I thought, you know, about your Minister for Energy. If in fact he developed prostatic carcinoma, and I don't hope he doesn't, but if he did, do you know what? He'd understand what I was talking about. It's when something dreadful strikes someone, like they get cancer or their child, or suddenly they realise what life's about and how precious life is. So it's very easy to practice psychic numbing. I think we do that until it strikes home, and then you get it. So all our body's made of trillions of cells, and in each cell are the chromosomes. This is a simplistic explanation, but there's a pair of genes in each cell called the regulatory genes that control the rate of cell division. And if one of them gets damaged by radiation hitting it, the DNA molecule sits quietly and the cell sits quietly for 5 to 60 years, and that's called the latent period of carcinogenesis, the time it takes for cancer to develop. Whereas if I sneeze on you, in 2 days you're sneezing and you've got my cold. Or measles, incubation time is 3 weeks. Diphtheria, whooping cough, and the like. But cancer, the incubation time is long, it's cryptogenic, and it's the very reason the nuclear industry get away with what they're doing. If people just drop dead all around the nuclear power plants, they couldn't do it. Okay, so one day, instead of the cell dividing by mitosis in a regulated way to produce 2 daughter cells, it goes Burko and produces trillions and trillions of cells. So what a cancer is unregulated cell growth. And these cells are very aggressive. They'll infiltrate into lymph channels and blood vessels, and they'll go up to the liver and develop one cell a second tumour. And that's called a secondary or a metastasis. And it spreads all over the body, bone, brain, and then the patient withers away. It's like a, what's the thing, a parasite. And the patient dies and the cancer dies. Now, John McCain has had 4 melanomas with metastases in his lymph glands. If he gets to be president, he could have a recurrence of his cancer when it's spread, and he'd have to have chemo and radiotherapy, and he would be incapacitated. So who would be acting president? Now, this is serious. We took out a full-page ad with 2,500 doctors signing, warning people of this, and the media hasn't really picked it up. And he could get a secondary tumour in his, say, frontal lobe and press the button. People do crazy things when they get cancer in the head, sometimes. So that's cancer. Now, what about the testicles and ovaries? They're the more important organs. So you've got an egg and a little tiny, tiny sperm, the fastest swimmer, and it makes it. And it joins up with the egg, and you have a normal diploid number of chromosomes and genes. Now, every single gene in the egg and sperm is important. We are who we are because we've got human genes, although 99.2% of our genes are the same as the chimps. So we don't really know much about genetics yet at this stage. But, you know, I am who I am because I've got my mother's sort of fierce blue eyes and my father's reddish hair and his long nose, and, you know, we are who we are because of our genes we've inherited from our ancestors and our parents. However, we all carry several hundred genes for disease, for diabetes, for cystic fibrosis, for all sorts of diseases. But you don't know you carry them unless you mate with someone with the same gene, because you need 2 genes to produce a disease, or blue eyes. You can only have blue eyes if you have 2 blue-eyed genes, because they're recessive. If you have 1 brown-eyed gene and 1 blue-eyed gene, brown-eyed gene's dominant, you're going to have brown eyes, or 2 brown-eyed genes. So here's a quiz. 2 parents had blue eyes and they had a brown-eyed child. Where did the brown-eyed gene come from? The milkman. So we all carry several hundred. Now, but radiation increases the number of genetic mutations and will increase over time genetic abnormalities. There are 16,000 diseases now described caused by genetic abnormalities. My specialty, cystic fibrosis, is the most common fatal genetic disease of childhood. 1 in 25 carry the gene, so in this audience there would be some carriers. A few, actually. So We mustn't irradiate those beautiful genes in the eggs and sperm, and I don't want anyone else to leave. I might be boring, but this is very important for you to understand. This is like you're in medical school learning about genetics, and you've got to know this because it's your future. Don't anyone else leave unless you have to go to the bathroom. Okay, because I'm the boss. What? No, you can't ask any questions yet. Oh, more money in the parking meter. Sorry, I apologise. On bended knees. Okay, so that's cancer. I won't go through all the forms of radiation, but suffice it to say, 1 X-ray to the pregnant abdomen doubles the incidence of leukemia. Because fetuses and babies are 10 to 20 times more sensitive to radiation than adults. That's why they ask when you have an X-ray, when was your last period? To know if you're in the second half of your cycle and you could be pregnant and you don't know, right? So it's very important to know, and radiation is cumulative. Each dose you get adds to your risk of getting cancer. Never have an unnecessary X-ray. Hands up those who have their teeth X-rayed every year. Well, you don't need it. My ex-husband was a radiologist. They make a lot of money. You never need your teeth X-rayed except if you've got a really sore tooth, an abscess or whatever. Do not allow them. Notice they give you, put your the film on, and then they say, breathe in, hold it, and run out of the room and click. So they're not in the room to be exposed. Do not have unnecessary X-rays. Question your doctor when you need. Now, if you have pneumonia, the risk is minimal, the benefit's great for the diagnosis, because you can be treated, right? So that's very basic radiation biology. Okay, so the uranium is mined, and it takes a huge amount of fossil fuel to mine the uranium, because if you go to a uranium mine, you'll see these huge trucks, half the size of this room, and huge diggers, and God knows what, pumping out carbon dioxide. Then you've got to crush the ore, because it's all big rocks and stuff, more CO2. In America, they enrich all the Western world's uranium in Paducah, Kentucky, and they've got this nickel plate with tiny little holes in, and they turn the uranium into a gas called uranium hexafluoride, which is very hot, and they force it through these micropores. On one side it stays 238, and this side is 235. And it turns from 0.7% to 3%. It is so energy consuming, this process, they've got 2 1,500 megawatt coal-fired plants to enrich the uranium. Yet the nuclear industry will tell you and advertise that they produce no emissions, and they're the answer to global warming. And I can't stand scientists who lie. This is immoral behaviour. I can't stand NPR, National Public Radio, National Petroleum Radio, who carries the ads for the Nuclear Energy Institute. We can't be lied to about these things that are so important to understand. It's like me lying to a patient. We wouldn't do that. You wouldn't lie to your children. Lying is medically contraindicated. Also, because this uranium hexafluoride goes through hundreds of miles of pipes and it's hot, they have other pipes adjacent to it with CFC gas that cool the pipes. CFC is a refrigerant. It's banned under the Montreal Protocol because it damages the ozone, and it's 10 to 20,000 times more potent as a global warmer than CO2. These pipes leak. They're old. The nuclear industry has been, quotes, grandfathered out of the Montreal Protocol. The Americans do that all the time. And 93% of the CFC gas released in America comes from the uranium enrichment plant. More global warming. How did I find out? I rang the EPA and they told me. And lots of other things happen there too, and I haven't gone into the whole cycle. This is called the nuclear fuel cycle or nuclear fuel chain. So you see, the nuclear industry thinks that, you know, they want you to think that a nuclear power plant stands alone, and they don't want you to think about how it's fueled. It's like a human being, and you mustn't think how they were conceived or something like that. Yeah, it's like conception. I've just thought of that. That's a good one. Now, these huge plates of nickel, which are very heavy, nickel's very valuable. They're radioactive. But in America, they've worked this thing out called below Regulatory Concern, BRC, and they've decided that the nickel doesn't have to follow regulations, and they're recycling it into children's teeth braces, hip replacements, belt buckles, jewellery, cutlery and furniture.